Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is Neoliberalism Run Wild. Or I should say, Running Wild. So I know someone is here, but they have not announced themselves yet. So, what we'll be doing tonight is covering three subjects. First, there is the GOP burning down the country, quote unquote. That's a symptom, of neoliberalism because the GOP is knee deep in it. And then there is also Pollyanna Paul, specifically Paul Krugman, talking about how wonderful the economy is. And of course, only a neoliberal could think that. And the third subject is Democracy 4.0. New ideas concerning democracy and how to reform it during the period of the climate emergency. So, I'm going to share this on my Facebook page if you'll give me a moment. And then we'll get started. Okay. Here we are. And let me share the first of our articles tonight. Piece from Common Dreams. There are pictures of Jim Jordan there and Scott Perry, the Republican from Pennsylvania. Jim Jordan is from Ohio. Headline on this one is Trump's GOP wants to burn the country down and rule the ashes. This is by Rebecca Gordon from Tom Dispatch. It was originally published there on October 25th, 2023. The subtitle is, they don't want to drown the government quietly in a bathtub, but to strangle it on live TV, and keep in mind they have imagined nothing with which to replace it. Of course, because they don't have to imagine what would replace it. It would obviously be a government by the corporations themselves, instead of a government that is by the corporations, for the corporations, but not quite of the corporations yet. Anyway, sometimes the right wing in this country seems like a riddle wrapped in an enigma encased in a conundrum. Nice line. Do they want to strengthen the government in line with the once fringe doctrine of the, quote, unitary executive, unquote, concentrating most official power in the hands of a president who would then rule more or less by fiat? That's the fascist position. Not exactly, because in a fascist state, the official power concentrated, in the hands of the president, would be constantly second guessed by the corporations that the president, was bound to. Remember, fascism is the unification of the corporations with the state. Or would they prefer to destroy the government, to starve the beast, something anti-tax activist Grover Norquist used to call for decades ago? He said, quote, "I don't want to abolish the government," unquote, he declared. Quote again, "I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub," unquote. That's the anti-government nihilist position. You might not think those two goals could exist comfortably within a single party, and of course you'd be right if you were talking about an ordinary American political party. But the Republicans are no longer an ordinary party. In many respects, in fact, they have become the, however fractious, sole property of one Donald J. Trump, that former and quite possibly, God forbid, future president, has no trouble simultaneously advocating contradictory, not to mention devastating ideas. That's because for him, ideas are an entirely fungible currency that he deploys primarily to maintain the attention and the adulation of his, and it is increasingly his alone, GOP, quote, base, unquote. And precisely because Trump has so little invested in actual policy, the right wing believes he's a weapon they can point and shoot in whatever direction they choose, because the right wing is composed, of the corporate heads who stand behind Trump and who are really running most of the government. Trump only appears to be running it because in the few areas where he gives his attention, he so completely dominates everyone in that particular area. However, his attention is very limited, so all the rest of the government can be dominated by corporate servants of various kinds. You might also wonder why, at a moment when horror is being heaped on horror in Israel-Palestine, when wars continue unabated in Ukraine and Sudan, I find myself focusing on some distantly in the weeds aspects of the American political system. Perhaps it's partly to distract myself from all the other nightmares around us, but even if I believed, which I don't, that the right response to the crisis in Israel/Palestine involved sending more weapons and money to Benjamin Netanyahu, Congress isn't in a position to appropriate anything at the moment. Of course, since this article was written, Congress has elected itself a new speaker, or should I say, the Republican Fascist Party has elected itself, a new speaker, and we will get to him in just a few moments. But right now, just as we face so many crises globally, the legislative branch of the world's theoretically, and I think it's increasingly theoretically, most powerful country has ceased to function. Perhaps by the time you read this, Republicans in the House of Representatives will have stopped squabbling over which right-wing bigot should be speaker. Maybe they will have opted for Jim Jordan, who has accused the Biden administration of planning to replace white voters with immigrants, or perhaps someone else entirely. Remember, too, that whatever joker emerges as speaker from such a chaotic process will be second in line to the presidency should something happen to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And of course, with this right wing, we always have to worry that something might suddenly happen to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Fearsome power Recently, I've somehow managed to end up on a few right-wing email lists. The strangest people, Ron DeSantis, for example, are writing to ask me for money. My most recent supplicant was Stephen Miller, former senior advisor to President Trump and co-author with Steve Bannon of Trump's 2017 inaugural address, in which the new president inveighed darkly against the American carnage he saw defiling the nation's landscapes. These days, Miller is himself a president of something called the America First Legal Foundation, which bills itself as, quote, fighting back against lawless executive actions and the radical left, unquote. Well, if they're able to reelect Donald Trump, okay, once again, then they're going to get a lot more lawless executive actions than they're getting now, but they won't mind those, of course, because those actions are going to be from and for the radical right. Miller, it turns out, has written to let me know that, quote, we are living in extremely perilous times and a truly dangerous moment for our republic, unquote. As it happens, I agree with him, though obviously not for the same reasons. Quote, the federal bureaucracy has turned against the American people, unquote. Miller's missive continues. I quote again, it has been completely corrupted into an ideological monolith of hard left loathing for America. The fearsome power, his emphasis, of the state is raining down on political dissidents, while violent and vile criminals are released into our communities. Yeah, the Republicans are continually talking about those violent criminals being released into our communities, unquote. The solution, of course, is to send money to America First Legal so it can get on with the business of, quote, fighting back against lawless executive actions, unquote. Stephen Miller, however, will likely be less concerned about the fearsome power of the state once it's again in the hands of Donald Trump. Indeed, he's part of a group of former and present Trump advisors engaged in planning for a potential presidential transition in 2025. These include Russell Vought, who ran Trump's Office of Management and Budget, and former Trump White House Chief of Personnel, John McEntee. As the New York Times reported in July, Mr. Vought and Mr. McEntee are involved in Project 2025, $22 million presidential transition operation that is preparing policies, personnel lists, and transition plans to recommend to any Republican who may win the 2024 election. The transition project, the scale of which is unprecedented in conservative politics, is led by the Heritage Foundation, a think tank that has shaped the personnel and policies of Republican administrations since the Reagan presidency, and some Democratic administrations too, I might add, since I believe the Affordable Care Act was first conceived of, at least in some similar form, uh, in the halls of the Heritage Foundation. The key thrust of Project 2025 is full implementation of the, quote, unitary executive principle, the view that the Constitution locates the power of the executive branch in a single individual, the president, in its very maximalist version, according to the Times. This theory also contradicts the long-held doctrine of the separation of powers, under which three co-equal branches of government, executive, legislature, executive, the legislative and judicial, provide checks and balances on each other. Under the unitary executive principle, presidential power simply outweighs that of either Congress or the Supreme Court. Project 2025's backers know that Donald Trump will agree and act, accordingly by, quote, long held doctrine, unquote. I mean, the blueprint for democratic government that goes back to two 17th and 18th century political philosophers, Charles Montesquieu, who I should give the French pronunciation, Charles Montesquieu, who first wrote about the separation of powers, and John Locke, whose ideas about uh, 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 um, unalienable rights are enshrined in the Declaration of Independence. Like Montesquieu, Locke advocated for separation of governmental powers in which the legislative, not the executive, would be supreme. In that view, the democratically elected legislature makes a nation's laws, and just as the name suggests, the executive exists to execute them, quote unquote. Despite their occasional um, 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 homages to Montesquieu and Locke, the Heritage Foundation and its followers have flipped that thinking upside down by insisting the Constitution considers the executive branch superior to the other two. If that were the case, wouldn't the executive branch be described in that document's first article? In fact, Articles 1, 2, and 3 describe the legislative, executive, and judicial functions in that order, suggesting that if any of these is superior, it is, as Locke argued, the legislative. Heritage, however, points to Article 2, which begins, quote, the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. He shall hold his office during a term of 4 years, and together with the Vice President, chosen for the same term, be elected as follows, unquote. What follows, quote unquote, is a lengthy description of the very electoral process that Trump and company tried so hard to suborn on January 6, 2021. While Trump was president, he delighted in explaining to anyone who'd listen that he had, quote, in Article 2, where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, unquote. Hope all of you remember that. Trump was real big on that. I have the right to do whatever I want as president, and I can't be prosecuted either. At the time, that suggestion of ultimate power was met with widespread derision. Unfortunately, not enough derision, and not with immediate impeachment, which is what should have happened, as well as conviction. However, were Trump to be reelected, the folks at the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 and the America First Policy Institute have plans to, as the Starship Enterprise captain Jean-Luc Picard would say, make it so. As the Times reported in July, their goal is, quote, to alter the balance of power by increasing the president's authority over every part of the federal government that now operates by either law or tradition with any measure of independence from political interference by the White House, unquote. Consider what follows a first step in exactly that particular direction. Well, I am generally not, a unitary executive person, but I must add that I do think it would be far better for the nation if the Federal Reserve was reformed so that it was within the Treasury Department of the United States. Because for a very long time, I've been noticing that what happens to the economy is often blamed on the President of the United States, even though the main institution that actually does things to the economy is the Federal Reserve branch. I don't think that's fair. I don't think, it's democratic. And I think it would be better if the Federal Reserve were located in the executive branch. certainly is an executive function. It's an extremely important one, and it should not be in some independent agency somewhere where the people are not elected and where the people are unaccountable to anyone who has been elected. Not good. Anyway, the author says a Schedule F in government. Okay, now let's truly dive into the weeds. In his final year as president, Trump issued an executive order amending the regulations governing the Federal Civil Service. That service was instituted by law in 1871 in response to what was then seen as a rampant favoritism throughout the federal government. Patronage jobs, positions granted, often to the friends and family of powerful politicians, or in return for money or favors, were officially eliminated. Competitive processes designed to select qualified candidates for specific positions replaced the old system. Today, the Office of Personnel Management oversees the hiring and firing of roughly 2.2 million federal civil service employees, civilian federal employees, the people who keep the wheels of government turning. They administer Social Security, Medicare, and the Internal Revenue Service, among many other things. They make sure your meat isn't rotten, and the alcohol content of your vodka bottle is what it says on the label. The vast majority of those employees are chosen through competitive examinations, but about 4,000 key positions are directly appointed by the president or other senior officials, including the leadership of many agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and other government, and other um, um, government um, 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 executives. It's not unreasonable for presidents to want to put their own policy stamp on various branches of government through such appointments. These 4,000 positions exempted from competitive hiring fall into 5 categories in 5 schedules described in a subsection of Title V of the United States Code. To be exact, Rule 6 of subsection A of Title V. I told you we were going to get into the weeds. List in Schedules A through E the employees exempt from civil service examinations. Or at least those were all the exempt categories until October 2020. That's when Donald Trump issued an executive order creating Schedule F, which exempted from competitive hiring all, quote, career positions in the federal service of a confidential, policy determining, policy making, or policy advocating character, unquote. Such a broad, ill-defined category could, in fact, have come to include any junior employee in any federal department who might, in the course of his or her employment, have cause to send a memo to a superior advocating any action. It's estimated that implementing Schedule F would have sent the number of exempt civil service employees soaring from 4,000 to roughly 50,000. On taking office, however, President Joe Biden immediately rescinded the executive order, so at the moment, at least, Schedule F no longer exists. In fact, the feckless President Trump we knew wasn't even vaguely prepared to replace 50,000 civil servants with his own people during his last few months in office, or likely as not over the following 4 years had he been reelected. That's where the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 comes in. They are now spending millions of dollars to recruit and vet political appointees who would toe the Trump line, which is a line they hope to draw in a future Trump presidency. This is so important because if they get to do this, Trump would have the means to implement the dictatorship which he envisions and which he has promised us in various statements that he has made. The next section is called Jokers to the Right of Me. The rock band Steelers Wheel caught our current situation perfectly back in 1972 when they sang about, quote, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, unquote. The jokers to the right of me and to the right of the majority of the people in this country are the members of the House Freedom Caucus, their allies, and other MAGA followers. They are the ones deconstructing the house of cards that Congress is becoming at this very moment. To call them um, anarchists would be an insult to conscientious anarchists everywhere. They are, in fact, anti government nihilists who believe in little beyond the kind of gunslinging performative violence. They don't want to drown the government quietly in the bathtub, but to strangle it on live TV, and keep in mind that they have imagined nothing with which to replace it. Where to begin? Those freedom caucusers in the House are now walking weapons in search of a target. Yes, they threatened to shut down the government unless their demands were met, but then they couldn't even decide what those demands were. Did they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and other social service programs? Impeach President Biden? Stop the prosecutions of Donald Trump? Increase border security? Stop funding Ukraine's war effort? When House Speaker Kevin McCarthy agreed to cooperate with the Democrats to prevent just such a shutdown, they threw him out. Then they couldn't agree on a new speaker, even though the House of Representatives can conduct business without one. So yet not a day passes without a bomb thrower like Matt Gaetz strutting around saying things like, quote, my goal is to get the most conservative Speaker of the House with broad trust across the conference. By the way, they did that. They got this guy, Mike Johnson, in as Speaker, and as I said before, we'll be coming to him in a few moments. The swamp of Washington, D.C. is going crazy right now because they're not in complete and total control, says Matt Gaetz. This gives us a great opportunity to put the interests of our fellow Americans first. All together now, much of this would be funny if it weren't so deadly serious. However, recent polls suggest that a 224 contest between Donald Trump and Joe Biden remains a toss-up. I think recent polls suggest that a 2024 contest between the two would deliver us Donald Trump once again to the Oval Office. To think of it as a toss-up ignores the recent approval rating of Joseph R. Biden, the Robinette, at 37%. As historian Heather Cox Richardson recently said to The Guardian, quote, democracies die more often through the ballot box than at gunpoint, unquote. The re-election of Trump, she believes, will signal, quote, an end of American democracy. I have absolutely no doubt about that, and he's made it very clear. You look at Project 2025, which is 1,000 pages on how you dismantle the federal government that has protected civil rights, provided a basic social safety net, by regulated business, and promoted infrastructure since 1933. The theme of his 2024 campaign is retribution. I don't think people understand now that if Donald Trump wins again, what we're going to put in power is those people who want to burn it all down. I can't say it any better than she has. says the author. They want to burn it all down so that they can rule over the smoldering ashes. That would put us on a true Schedule F for failed state. The condition this country seems hell-bent, on achieving. Yes, indeed, it seems hell-bent on achieving. And by the way, they did do what Matt Gaetz suggested. Specifically, they did elect, let me get that quote again. Where the hell is it? Anyway, the essence of it is they did get the radical right-winger that they all could agree upon. They did find him. He is a man that all of them consider to be very nice and very friendly and very, very right. He is, in fact, an evangelical Christian by the name of Mike Johnson. And my second piece is about this particular neoliberal deconstructionist. And there's a picture of Mike Johnson from an article by Common Dreams. Mike Johnson was applauded after being nominated for Speaker of the House of Representatives on October 24th, 2023. He was applauded, of course, by Republicans surrounding him, and he looks like a very friendly man indeed. However, the headline reads, new GOP House Speaker Mike Johnson has proposed trillions in cuts to Social Security and Medicare. So he's not friendly to older Americans like me, is he? Quote, now that Johnson is Speaker, he will do what the Republicans never stopped doing. Everything in their power to cut our Social Security and Medicare by hook, crook, or commission, unquote. This is one that's by Jake Johnson on October 25th. Newly Republican Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives has previously proposed trillions of dollars in cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and suggested that slashing the programs should be the top priority of Congress. Is he kidding? We're in the middle of a climate crisis. We have a climate emergency. We also have a monetarily sovereign federal government, and this idiot wants to cut social safety net programs important for old people and for the poor, and make this the most important priority of Congress? Is he mad? During his tenure as chair of the Republican Study Committee between 2019 and 2021, Representative Mike Johnson helped craft budget resolutions that called for roughly $2 trillion in Medicare cuts. That's over 10 years, of course. $3 trillion in Medicaid and Affordable Care cuts. That's over 10 years, of course. And $750 billion in Social Security cuts, noted Bobby Kogan of the Center for American Progress. Of course, this $5.75 trillion in cuts, which is what this all adds up to, averages $575 billion per year. It's very substantial, but fortunately it's not the end all and be all of the safety net. But don't get me wrong, safety net, okay, is already inadequate. It's about half the size of safety nets, okay, in European countries. It's much lower, much narrower in scope than the safety net in Canada. Australia makes our safety net look sick. So Bobby Kogan tweeted, "Don't believe me, it's right on his website. Representative Johnson is proud of these cuts. Here's a screenshot from page 193 of the fiscal year 2020 budget resolution, which was his first one as chair of the RSC. In Mike Johnson House, he lays out his revenues and outlays versus the CBO baseline. Look at all the minuses here. Look at all the minuses in key programs. It's amazing, isn't it? Just amazing. Alex Lawson, who's executive director of the progressive advocacy group Social Security Works, said in a Wednesday statement following the speakership vote that the budget proposals released by the Johnson-led RSC also endorsed raising the Social Security retirement age, lowering annual cost of living benefit increases, and advancing privatization efforts. Of course, the cost of living benefit increases don't keep pace with inflation now. Every year, Social Security falls farther behind in giving to seniors a socially inclusive living retirement pension. Multimillionaire Johnson has also made the outrageous claim that forced births are necessary to fund Social Security, said Lawson, referring to the Louisiana Republicans' attempt to blame Roe v. Wade for depriving the United States of, quote, able-bodied workers. Of course, Roe v. Wade is gone now, isn't it? Lawson added that Johnson, quote, recently joined the vast majority of House Republicans to vote for a commission designed to cut Social Security and Medicare behind closed doors. Quote, now that Johnson is Speaker, he will do what the Republicans never stopped doing, everything in their power to cut our Social Security and Medicare by hook, crook, or commission, unquote, said Lawson, quote. The White House has rightfully referred to such a commission as a death panel, unquote, quote unquote, for Social Security and Medicare. Seniors and people with disabilities are counting on the Biden administration, as well as congressional Democrats, to stand united to protect our earned benefits. That means rejecting any commission proposal, unquote. Johnson's positions on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are in no way out of step with the overwhelming majority of the House Republican caucus. Earlier this year, the RSC, the Republican Study Committee, now chaired by Representative Kevin Hern, Republican of Oklahoma, issued a budget proposal that called for gradually raising the Social Security retirement age to 69, a change that would slash benefits across the board. Well, I'm 84 already, I guess. The Republican Study Committee, which is comprised of 3/4 of the House GOP caucus, also proposed turning Medicare into a voucher program and massively cutting Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, and Affordable Care Act subsidies. So, in other words, the Republican Study Committee plan, by turning Medicare into a voucher program, would be a death sentence for me, because I would never be able to afford to get the care that I get now, because I have Medicare. I have a Medicare Advantage program, but at least CMS is there to be looted by the private companies. So CMS is getting looted. I'm not getting looted quite so much. Anyway, that is what we know about Mike Johnson, but we also know that Mike Johnson is an evangelical Christian, which means he believes in the end times nonsense, but which also means that he is rushing at this point to get funding through for the wars in Ukraine and for Israel to prosecute its genocide and ethnic cleansing on the Palestinians. And why would he be for that? Because, of course, he wants to hasten, as an evangelical Christian, he wants to hasten the coming of the end times. And that means having an Israel that is inhabited, that has governmental authority from the river to the sea. We know that's what he is for. We don't know for sure whether that is behind his motivation to support the current wars, but we do know that that's one of his hot buttons. So, good night, Steve. Good night. Steve says, cutting SS is political suicide. You're right. And there's a beautiful full moon tonight, Steve Wolfbrand says. And there is April Mano. Dee says, the show link is not in the group chat. I was sure I put it in earlier today. What the heck is going on here? Let me see. Let's see if I put the group chat in. Oh my God. Sorry, Dee. I was sure I put that in, but I guess I got so busy putting in the link to Israel's Kristallnacht, which I thought was a brilliant piece, and that I didn't go further and put in the link. Well, if you're game, I will certainly put in the link right now. Hang on. There it is. My most sincere apologies for doing that again. I must be slipping. And Juju says, send me the link as well. Steve says, hi, Juju. Okay. April Mano says, hiya, D, but to give baby a doggy bone, she's teething, and nothing is helping. And here is D, right here.
Hello.
Well, thank you, Dee, for coming. I'm sorry about that. I must have done that in a hurry this afternoon.
Yeah, I was going to say the article you put in there. I read that. It's a very good article, and I thought that would be a good discussion for the weekend, like say Saturday evening.
Yeah, you mean the Counterpunch article?
Yeah.
That was really a brilliant article. Yeah, that was very, very good. Uh, April says she's teething and nothing is helping. Laugh out loud. Okay, about to give. Uh, okay, I'm going to get to the remaining articles. Uh, the third one is interesting because it illustrates the Pollyannish position sometimes taken by a neoliberal economist. I'm sure he would deny that he is a neoliberal economist, but I believe that is fairly easy to prove. The person that I'm talking about is, of course, Paul Krugman, that star of the New York Times. In the Common Dreams article covering his antics, that article was entitled, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times," unquote. And the subtitle, "Why won't anyone believe Paul Krugman's economic um, optimism?" This article is by Les Leopold, who's a labor guy from way back, October 26, 2023, today, that is. And Les Leopold is not, okay, a neoliberal. Liberal economist Paul Krugman has been fretting for a while. Oh, I'm sorry. Liberal economist Paul Krugman, sorry about that, has been fretting for a while about the disconnect between the public's negative perception of the economy and the positive reality of stunningly low unemployment rates, rising wages, and significant economic growth. In describing the U.S. economy, he recently wrote, quote, "But one thing is clear. We have been remarkably successful, even if nobody will believe it," unquote. Why won't anyone believe it? For starters, is it true that most people don't believe what Krugman considers terrific economic news? That certainly seems to be the case according to a September 2023 Harris poll. Two-thirds of Americans, 65%, believe the economy is worse than the media makes it out to be rather than better. 35% thinks, okay, it's better than it used to be. In August, the unemployment rate was 3.8%, close to a 50-year low. I have to add, though, that is the U3 unemployment statistic. If you use the U6 unemployment statistics, it's maybe twice that. And if you use a statistic that people don't use in the federal government, but can be computed from federal statistics called the disemployment statistic, then the unemployment rate is undoubtedly more like 9%, even though I have to admit I haven't computed the disemployment statistic in some time. But, okay, anyway, that 3.8% is said to be close to a 50-year low. I don't think it really is for another reason, and that is 50 years ago, we used to define unemployment in a different way. But the poll found that a majority of Americans, 51%, wrongly believe that unemployment is nearing a 50-year high, while fewer believe it's actually low, 49%. A significant part of this disconnect stems from an ever-declining public trust in government. Ah, yes. The real story. The American National Election Survey has been asked the following question since 1958, quote, "Do you trust the government to do what is right?" unquote. In 1958, 74% answered to this question, quote, "always," unquote, or, quote, "most of the time," unquote. A peak of 77% was reached in 1974. 1964, sorry. You will remember that peak was reached under Lyndon Johnson before he began to lie about the Vietnam War. Public trust crashed over the next 15 years, falling to 26% by 1980. Today it sits at an all-time low of 16%. And you wonder why January 6th happened. The explanation for it is right there. The lies, the frauds, the lousy results that government has gotten since 1964. Most of that due to neoliberalism, has resulted in public trust falling to an all-time low of 16%. From 74% to 16%. That is a great measure of the decline in legitimacy of the federal government, I'm afraid. The reason why we're in danger of getting taken over by a dictator right now is because of that trust figure and because of all the things that were done that resulted in the loss of trust. It's not that difficult to identify some of the causes of this decline. From the mid-1960s to 1970, government lies about the Vietnam War undermined its trustworthy image, and faith in government crashed nearly 20 percentage points. It was still up there, though, at 54% even by 1970. Much of the 1960s generation, I interjected that into the piece, much of the 1960s generation felt betrayed after being asked to serve in a bloody war that had been justified by a nonstop series of fabrications. Lyndon Johnson fabrications and those of his government. And in part, press fabrications also. The widespread prosecution of recreational drug use only added to alienation from government because that was so hypocritical. It was incredible. The widespread prosecution of recreational drug use was restricted to working class people and to certain racial groups. Generally speaking, middle class kids could get away with that. And they generally did get away with that. And that was fine for them. But of course, the feedback was there are two systems of law in this country, one for them and one for us. The youth rebellion of the 1960s was also for many a libertarian revolt against not only big government, but also big corporations, big labor, and big everything except big rock concerts. That was a clever line. Then came Watergate, the constellation of crimes perpetrated by President Richard Nixon to secure his re-election in 1972. Within 2 years, he became the first president to resign from office, with his own tape recordings revealing the extent of his crimes. His vice president, Gerald Ford, took office and soon pardoned Richard Nixon, which further lowered trust in government. After Jimmy Carter was elected in 1976 and failed to revive the economy during his only term, trust in government fell to a new low. I can't resist saying that Jimmy Carter's failure was in some large part due to his appointment of Paul Volcker as the chairman of the Federal Reserve and his prioritization of fighting inflation over fighting the strength of the labor market, allowing unemployment to rise, allowing the misery index to rise so high during his administration. There was that, and there was his wars against labor, a very important part of his own party. And then, of course, there was his war with Teddy Kennedy over Medicare for All. They couldn't agree on a Medicare for All program when they had the votes in Congress necessary to pass one. In 1980, it stood, that is the trust level, as measured by that indicator, stood at only 25%. The congressional hearings led by Senator Frank Church in 1975 further eroded faith in government. Those hearings revealed political dirty tricks conducted by U.S. government agencies. So, in other words, it wasn't the church hearings that eroded faith in government. It was what the church hearings, uncovered, the political dirty tricks conducted by U.S. government agencies, an aspect of government corruption, including assassination attempts on foreign leaders and the illegal monitoring of American citizens in the United States. Those actions undermined the trust in government. Let's not blame the messenger here. And among the targets were Supreme Court justices, reporters, government officials, and political activists. Also revealed was the FBI wiretapping of Martin Luther King Jr. This was not a government to be proud of. Then came the incessant anti-government liturgy from the Reagan administration. Quote, the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, unquote. Later amplified by the Roger Ailes Fox News right-wing ecosystem during Clinton and Obama presidential administrations. The lame deceptions used to justify the Iraq War also didn't enhance trust in government either. Today, we not only still have Fox News, but we can also point to the fracturing and polarization of the news media via the internet, which makes it more and more difficult to discern what is and what is not true about the economy. This article does not, unfortunately, get to the Democratic administrations of Obama, which were a source of loss of trust in government as well. And of course, the administration of George Bush. 2/3 of respondents reported it's difficult to be happy about positive economic news when they feel financially squeezed every month. Yeah. 69% of Republicans feel financially squeezed. 68% of Democrats feel financially squeezed. For Krugman and others who are quite prosperous, yes, he's a millionaire a number of times over, it is hard, if not impossible, to relate to one key economic fact reported by the Federal Reserve More than 1/3 of U.S. adults, 37%, lack enough money to cover a $400 emergency in 2022, up from 32% in 2021. That means approximately 96.5 million American adults are living paycheck to paycheck. And how about the people who are living from Social Security check to Social Security check? How about that, Les? Financial insecurity is further exacerbated as tens of thousands of workers suffer through mass layoffs. The layoffs are even ripping through the highly profitable tech sector. In 2023, so far, 245,809 employees have lost their jobs at tech companies. It's doubtful that these working people are feeling chipper about the state of the economy. Krugman's disconnect is not between public perception of the economy and economic reality. It's between those who are economically secure and free from job loss fears. And Krugman has two jobs, of course. He's a New York Times uh, a columnist, and he's also a full professor at Princeton University. Has been for years, and God knows how many other consulting jobs he has. It's between those who are economically secure and free from job loss fears and the millions upon millions who live and breathe economic insecurity each, and every day. Yes, the precariat economy. When Krugman writes, we have been remarkably successful, unquote, much of the country is asking, quote, who is this we he's talking about, unquote? I don't know who this we is. How about you, D?
Krugman.
Huh?
He's he's just so out of it.
He is out of touch. But the point is, those people who are secure in their jobs, generally speaking, are out of touch.
Yes,
They
they
don't
are. We see
know
that
the
all the time.
reality of most of the economy in the United States. Those who are profiting from the neoliberal economic structure we have feel
And they
secure.
stay in this small circle. They have a small circle of friends, like you said. They just stay within their little circle, and the rest of the world they don't see.
They don't see, they don't socialize with, they don't talk to. They're only aware of their particular reality. And to some degree, they're living in a fantasy world because many of them who hold great and seemingly secure jobs now can find that in 6 months, the Federal Reserve has done something which causes them to lose their jobs. And they won't even see it coming because they don't pay attention to what the Federal Reserve does.
No.
They blindly go ahead and they think tomorrow is going to be just like it is today. They don't understand that their security depends on what faraway people in Washington decide and what's
Mm-hmm.
decided even about foreign policy, which can
It's terrible.
which can result in backlashes
Mm-hmm.
that grievously affect their lives. Okay, I'm going to move on to the final piece. Oops, I almost moved on to something else entirely. So let me get this next one up. This one is seemingly more hopeful. This is also from Common Dreams. This is a banner at a march to end fossil fuels on September 17, 2023, saying youth didn't vote for fossil fuels. It's true, they didn't. They voted for Biden because of the promises he made, which he has not kept, like $15 an hour minimum wage, and like the elimination of student debt, of course. What could the promise be of Democracy 4.0? That's the headline of this article. It's by David Orr. The subtitle is The Climate Crisis Demands a Democracy That Enforces the Rights of People Over Money. People over profits, you see. Establish the rights of posterity and nature, and achieves a fair distribution of costs, risks, and benefits within and between the generations. Okay, David Orr is a professor. Talk about someone who has a secure job. I believe he's a professor, okay, at MIT. His book, anyway, which is called, what's it called again? Democracy. Okay, Democracy in a Hot Time or something like that. It's somewhere here in the article. Oops. Yes, Democracy in a Hotter Time, which was just published by MIT Press in 2023. And yes, this is about democracy and the climate emergency. The extreme heat and fires of 2023 and the climate chaos ahead are due to a political crisis that paralyzed the United States and other democracies for half a century. As a result, Earth is hotter now than in the past 125,000 years and probably much longer. We are also in the midst of a radical right-wing assault on democracy and effective government. The fossil fuel industry causes one and funds the other. A very good observation, I think. What must we do? Obviously, a lot, but the starting point is the election of 2024 and a choice of how we will make decisions about the human future, whether democratically, okay, or otherwise. At this point, I have to refer to the first two articles I went to this evening. Specifically, those articles are very hard, okay, on the Republicans. Place a lot of blame, okay, on the Republicans and their craziness. But our third article talks about the reasons why the Republicans and the Democrats have developed in this way.
Shush.
And why the Democrats are also failures. That article dealt with declining trust over the period of many years due to the failures of government, both the Republicans and also the Democrats. And where are we for the election of 2024? We are facing a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And the choice itself is the existential crisis. Because selecting either one will tip us over into a climate emergency that we can do nothing about. But yes, the starting point is the election of 2024 and a choice of how we will make decisions about the human future, whether democratically or otherwise. A large fraction of the Republican Party has abandoned democracy in favor of autocracy. Worldwide, strong anti-democracy movements favor authoritarian governments because they are supposedly tougher and more efficient. But the record shows that authoritarian leaders are mostly demagogues who maintain power by corruption, fear, and hatred, not by solving long-term problems like climate change. In contrast, the case for democracy is anchored first in the belief that people have an unalienable right to say how they are governed, by whom, and to what ends, and second, in the awareness that no one can be trusted with unchecked power. The climate crisis adds a third. Everyone needs to be involved because it affects everyone. Without an engaged, competent, and supportive citizenry, no government can cope with the full effects of a destabilizing climate. In other words, we must count on the creativity, energy, and knowledge of the wider public. We have done it before in World War II, for example, by voting for the kind of leadership necessary to defeat fascism and by volunteering, sacrificing, creating, saving, and fighting. We did do that, okay, in World War II. But I have to add here that right now we have a situation where it won't be enough to elect the Democrats in 2024 because they are corrupt too, and we see it every single day. We see that Joe Biden is corrupt, and that Joe Biden has gotten us into two of the worst crises, both threatening to escalate into nuclear crises in Ukraine first and now in the Middle East. Okay, second. He lies. Yes, and Bonnie says he lies. Yes, he lies all the time. He's been lying over the last few days. And of course, why is there so little trust in government? Because the decision makers lie. Here it should be mentioned that one of the big gripes that the Chinese have against Tony Blinken is that he lies to them. One of the biggest gripes with the Russians have against us in the whole run up to the Ukraine war was that our government and the governments of the collective West of Europe constantly lied to Vladimir Putin about what their intentions were. And to some extent, in the early days, he believed them. And he even believed them as late as the Minsk Accords, Minsk I and Minsk II. He believed some of the Europeans that he had dealt with. He trusted them. They were serious about the treaties, okay, that were negotiated. But they lied.
He wanted to take them at their word.
He wanted to take them at their word, and he did take them at their word because he negotiated those treaties and then he waited for them to be enforced. He waited for 2 years for them to be enforced, and they never were. And Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, if I recall his first name correctly, both admitted that the Minsk I and Minsk II treaties were a ruse to fool Putin and to gain time so that the West could arm, the Ukraine government so that they could be a tool to weaken Russia in a proxy war that was being planned by the collective West and by the United States, by NATO. dishonesty shot all through the system. Lies to us, lies to their counterparts in the international system, lies to everyone. Going on. Democracy, however, has always been a bet against the odds, beginning long ago around tribal campfires, with the idea that people deserve a say in decisions that affect them. Call that Democracy 1.0. In ancient Greece, Democracy 2.0 is an experiment in public dialogue and reasoned arguments about the issues of the day. Modern Democracy 3.0 began with the American Revolution, culminating in the U.S. Constitution. But don't stack too much store by that, because the U.S. Constitution did happen to legitimize slavery.
Mhm.
Not very democratic, that. It also did not give suffrage to everyone, only property owners. It reflected the ideas of the European Enlightenment that aimed to disenthrall publics from superstition and arbitrary authority. In due course, the idea that, quote, all men are created equal led, however imperfectly, to an enlarged but franchised, including women, but people of color, in due course, by the way. In due course, over 200 years, led to an enlarged franchise among women, people of color, okay, and indigenous peoples. I mean, it was, after all, almost 200 years since 1776 that blacks actually received, by and large, okay, the vote in many areas of the United States. Democracy 4.0 in due course, 200 years. 200 years is not due course. Democracy 4.0, however, is an aspiration rendered more difficult by the flaws of 3.0, but more urgently necessary by global warming, a, quote, timed test. The clock set by the laws of physics. The challenge is to adapt to governance, law, politics, and economies to the way the earth works as a complex biophysical system. And there's the rub. First, because earlier transitions were slow, taking centuries for ideas to take hold. And second, because we are not good at making systemic changes without causing uh, havoc. Even so, Democracy 4.0 cannot be just a slight improvement of our present democracy. A decent future for humankind, that is to say, a future that puts people over profits in a hotter and more crowded world, will require once again enlarging our vision of democracy to include, among other things, enforcing the rights of people over money, establishing the rights of posterity in nature, and achieving a fair distribution of costs, risks and benefits within and between generations. Whatever the details, Democracy 4.0 is founded on the conviction that we all do better when we work but together. So, how are we going to work together? That's our problem. Now, we can't figure out how to work together. Whatever the religion, the foundation of Democracy 4.0 is moral. The belief that we are our brothers and sisters, keepers and trustees for posterity. The neoliberals don't believe that. And the neoliberals in Congress certainly don't believe that we are our brothers and sisters, keepers and trustees for posterity. They believe in profits over people. And that's what the rest of us have to work together to change. Going on with the article, whatever the language, it will require a better balance between pronouns denoting, quote, I, unquote, quote, me, unquote, and um, um, also, quote, mine on the one hand, and, quote, we, unquote, quote, ours, one quote, and, quote, us, unquote. Different cultures, Democracy 4.0 will take different forms. But everywhere, it must help humankind escape from a cave of illusions about domination, oligarchy, technical fixes to profoundly human problems, and above all, from war and violence. If this seems a bridge too far, Democracy 2.0 and 3.0 once seem beyond reach as well. No one can predict the years ahead, but we do know that ideas now spread quickly worldwide. What once took centuries now happens fast and cuts both ways. Democracy 4.0, in other words, is not foreordained, and we should not underestimate the difficulties to disenthrall ourselves from modern superstitions and to overcome entrenched power. The transition to an improved democracy requires, okay, among other things, educating and mobilizing an ecologically competent and civically smarter citizenry. To that end, no student should graduate from any school, college, or university without understanding Earth system science, the civic principles of democracy, and what these mean for their lives and careers. The quote, great work, unquote, of the rising generation is to help build an inclusive movement that unites all those who prefer to drink clean water, breathe clean air, live in a stable climate, work in a fair and sustainable economy, and believe that they should have a say in creating a common future powered by sunlight. That movement will have many parts, but each is about, quote, who gets what, when, and how, unquote. By the way, that's a quote from what used to be a famous book by Harold uh, Laswell, which, if I recall correctly, he originally wrote in the 1930s, and which was called Politics, Who Gets What, When, and How. Which is to say, to go on with the article, it is fundamentally political. It is too soon to call Democracy 4.0 inevitable. But despite the odds, there are days when it feels like it, even when the time is so very short. This article was an excerpt from Democracy in a Hotter Time, published by MIT Press in 2023. I'm sorry, I said David Orr was from MIT. No, he is, David W. Orr is professor of practice at Arizona State University, and Paul Sears, distinguished professor of environmental studies and politics. Or maybe he is yet from MIT, we'll see. Oh, uh, and politics, okay, emeritus at Oberlin College. He's the author of numerous books, including Down to the Wire, Confronting Climate Collapse, Oxford 2009, and is co-editor of Democracy Unchained, okay, the New Press 2020. Now, David Orr is the editor, okay, and author of the book Democracy in a Hotter Time. So he's not the sole author, okay, of that book. He's the editor. But that sounds like a very interesting book. Okay, I'll try to do that. Okay, so April says, April says, Joe, I need a small favor, please. Okay, I think that's coming from D.
Let me put the mute on.
Okay, thanks. April says, Joe, I need a small favor, please. Could you differentiate when you add your commentary when reading articles? I'm not able to read along and have to try to sort out which is written and when you add your comments in on. If it's not too much trouble, okay, it would help. I often do that, but I know I've been remiss of late just going through and reading the articles and not really distinguishing my commentary. I am sorry, April. I will try to do that. I would try to be religious about doing that in future commentaries. Of course, the Harold Laswell piece here was definitely my commentary, and a number of other things were too. But I know it would help if I were to distinguish that. And after all is said and done, I should want to give myself the credit, right? So there it is. So D, have you any comments at this point?
Noisy here. The dogs are all barking.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's kind of noisy here right now.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Dogs are all barking.
Okay, so I think I've probably flogged this enough tonight. And so thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I think it's time to say goodnight. And April Romano says, thanks, love you. Yes, you deserve major credit. Thank you, April. That was nice of you to say. So, by the way, I'll be back tomorrow. What I have scheduled for tomorrow is a conversation with Christina Khalil. She is running for the Senate in New Jersey, for the U.S. Senate, that is, and she is a Green Party candidate. And so I'll be having a friendly conversation with her. And I think it's going to be very interesting. She seems like a hardworking young person, the kind of person we need to have, okay, in the Senate.
Yes,
And
we need to have younger people.
The way that race is shaping up in New Jersey right now, we have Senator Menendez, okay, who is running again, and everybody knows all about him and all the corruption that surrounds him. Okay, and a guy by the name of Andy Kim, who's a New Jersey congressman, would now like to step up, okay, to the Senate, and evidently has a huge polling lead, okay, at this time, okay, over Menendez. But I can tell you this when it comes to Andy Kim. Andy Kim is an opponent, okay, of Medicare for all. Okay, Andy Kim worked for the Obama administration, and he is a member of the establishment, tried and true member, okay, of the establishment. who votes with Joe Biden and what Joe Biden wants almost all the time,
That's the last person we need.
who takes big money. His corruption is not the same kind, okay, as Senator Menendez's, but it is there.
Right. He wants to be with the in crowd of the Democrats.
Yes, and he claims to be vaguely progressive, but he is not. He is not. And of course, one big litmus test is one big litmus test is is he taking the big money? Now he says he's not taking any money from corporate PACs, and I believe him. But that doesn't mean he's not taking any big money from the DCCC, who is basically laundering money from the corporate PACs and directly from the corporations. I also believe, I have to go back and check his record, but I also believe that we covered Andy Kim in one of our Dump the Corruption programs, and we noted that he was taking some corporate money and lots of money from rich people, okay, as well. So I'm going to go back and double check that for you, April. But anyway, we need a candidate who is running against him. That is very, very important. And Christina Carlile, in her positions, I can tell you right now, in her positions is going to be promising. There's only one way she's going to have a ghost of a chance, though, and I can tell you that right now. If there isn't a Dump the Corruption movement, Andy Kim is going to eat her alive because he already has big money set up for this campaign. He is well funded now. Maybe not as well funded as Senator Menendez, but well funded by Green Party standards. I'm sure Christina Khalil has very little money right now, which means she has no chance to win unless the Dump the Corruption campaign is successful. So she and I will also be talking about that tomorrow night. It's one of the things that we're talking about. April Mano says, I'm especially worried about all this Christo-fascism taking hold in the House. And well, you should be, because, of course, this Mike Johnson is an evangelical Christian. He is also someone who organized the movement in the House to overturn the election results in 2020. He is a Trumpist. He's just quieter about stuff like that than Jim Jordan, and quieter than Kevin McCarthy. He's a man who has the veneer of a friendly face, but he is a skunk. Make no mistake, okay, about that. And he is a Christo-fascist kind of skunk.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be worried about that, April. You all should be worried about that.
We should, because as we talk with foreign policy, that's the issue that there, and that's why we always use the term Zionist, because you have the Christian Zionists. It's just not, say, people will link, some Jewish people to Zionism, not realizing the largest group is the Christian Zionist. Because you look at the population-wise, how many, Christians there are in the U.S., And just around the world, how many Christians compared to how many Jewish people there are?
And right now, since he is now the Speaker in the House, he's in a beautiful position to push through the big spending program, the $100 billion spending program that Joe Biden has in mind now for Ukraine, for Israel, and considerable money for beefing up Taiwan and the Pacific
Right.
as well, to add to the campaign by the United States government to surround China.
Mm-hmm.
This ridiculous campaign to stop China from becoming a great power.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to tell you, there's no stopping China from becoming a great power. They
It's
already
true.
are a great power.
Yes. Yes, they are.
And if we don't think they are, we are deluding ourselves. And if we think we can stop them, 1.4 billion people, from becoming a great power, we are sadly mistaken. April Mono says, are learning. And then she also says, but neoliberalism means corporate slavery for us. It does, and that is what we have now.
Right.
Roughly, this is a corporate slave system that we have now, and also a slave system to billionaires, because the corporations have produced the billionaires. And the billionaires are having remarkable influence over the political system these days through the use of money and through the Supreme Court. So it's time to say goodnight. I will see you tomorrow night. April says, so corporate dictatorship. Well, we've been approaching that. I mean, we've been approaching it under Biden.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what he is trying to do and what the federal government is trying to do to suppress those who disagree with them over policy.
Mm-hmm.
We see their influence in social media every day. And they won't stop doing that. They'll preach democracy and they will suppress those opinions that are different from theirs. And they will use any tool to do it. Democrats are hypocrites and liars while they scream fascism, out to Republicans. It's not that they're mistaken in doing that, but it's about they're unwilling to look in the mirror at
That's
themselves.
true.
We need
A
Democrats.
lot of that going around.
Yeah, we need Democrats who are going to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
They're not very good at that.
No.
Okay, Dee, thank you for coming.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
thank you for your
Yes, good
comments,
night.
which were
Oh, you're
very good.
welcome. Good night. And good night to Bonnie. And please hit the like button, subscribe, and share. Share.
And please buy us coffees. And please buy us coffees. Okay, I think Dee has a Cash App account now as well.
Yes, I do.
That she's
That's
been
with my name.
So, and so April says, I put hashtag dump the corruption in Garland Nixon stream. Okay, I didn't know you can't do that. So crazy. Yeah, you can't do it in YouTube, but you can do it on Twitter, of course. You can use the hashtag, dump the corruption in relation to Garland Nixon's account. Okay, on Twitter. Yeah, I like Garland's work also, April.
Oh, same here. He's very good.
Okay, good night, everybody. Have a good
Yeah, good
evening.
night, Bonnie. Good night, April. Good night, everybody.
And we will both see you tomorrow.
Yes.
Or am I assuming too much? Will you have an 8 p.m. show tomorrow?
Well, I'll see what's happening tomorrow and go from there.
Okay. But I will have a 9 p.m. show, okay, in any case.
Right. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Let me get, there we go.
Okay.